Morning everybody, so here we are on Marsden Moor. Hopefully you can see in the background the beautiful heather, and it's such a beautiful, almost early autumny, early September day. So I'm going to go on a little walk here up to the moors, and I'm going to do some of my drawing and mixed media work. So I thought I'd introduce it, and then I'm going to turn the camera around and share with you a little bit of the walk. So I'll catch you soon. But we're in search of heather so that I can do some mixed media paintings incorporating the heather. It's really lovely to get the chance to get out here when it's this gorgeous, and I think that the weather's going to give me a couple of hours worth of nice sun and light. And sometimes it's kind of nice to do it when it's not so sunny, but the way the light hits the heather and the lovely shadows that you get from it, it's really quite special. So I just wanted to be able to capture that in this sort of window of opportunity before the winter. And I was just looking at some of my sketchbooks from last year, and this very spot in a very similarly sunny day, but at the end of December, and it was so sort of beautiful in its sort of simplicity of colour, but I just wanted that contrast. So at the end of the summer here, early autumn, having the beautiful heather, which is really quite stunning en masse. So I'll carry on up this path a bit. Just let me swing round to show you the lakes and the beautiful scenery that we have, which is really quite something. And you can probably just see some of the pockets of heather that sort of dots around really, and then you find these massive clumps and areas of it. And here we are again, another little pocket of this gorgeous heather, and it's actually really lovely because you can really see the shadow and the light and the different colours of it. So it is pinky purple, but it's also kind of more of a salmony colour, and then the sort of stones, the turquoisey edges of the stones are underneath this bit of it. So it's just lovely to see in this way. So I thought I'd just capture that in a bit of a scene. And then in the hill above, which is Pool Hill, you can just see it creeping up the sides of Pool Hill. Really lovely and special today. So this is the place I'm going to stop and paint and do my mixed media work. So I'm going to share with you the materials now, and then I'm going to get started. So here they are. I have acrylic paints. I just have a minimal palette. I use a black, a white, a blue, which is ultramarine blue, a red, which is burnt sienna, and a lemon yellow. And then I have a couple of jars of paint that I've mixed and added some water to make it easier to use. One of them is a lilac-y colour, so that in addition to those paints I've just shared with you, I've got alizarin crimson in that one. And then a darker one which just contains black and blue that I've already shared with you. I also have a spray because I like to use a spray, and although I don't think I can see it very easily there, I've got a purple ink that I'm using, an acrylic ink, so I use spray water. I have a graphite pencil, and other mark making includes some woodies, which are crayon pencils, some Inktense pencils, and some Conte, and I think I've got some charcoal there as well, and then some rags to rub with, and a brush. So I'm going to get started with this first one, and to start with, because I'm going to use ink, I'm going to spray the paper first using one of these mister sprays, and then when the ink's added it's going to bleed really nicely. So I often do that when I'm starting with ink. So as you can see, I'm using the dropper bottle top and getting it onto the paper, and I'll have to spray it in a second because it's just not moving enough. So you'll see me do that. Yeah, here we go. And then you get a really lovely bleeding effect, and it gives you some damp on the paper to start with, and then you can get some paint on there. But it's quite nice to start with the ink because you do kind of get this initial sort of impact, if you like, and you can get some lovely contrast going on. You can see what I'm doing on the right hand side is I'm using the dropper just to create some interesting marks that are on dry paper in comparison with the moist bleedy marks on the left hand side. now I'm bringing in the paint. And the paint is useful because it's kind of contrasty really with the inks in the way that it is, because it's quite opaque, and in this case it's quite desaturated. It goes quite nice with the purple, so the combination together works reasonably well. And as you can see, I'm trying to be quite awkward with my brush to get some more interesting and varied marks. And I'm actually looking at the hills beyond, and I'm also trying to get some of the feel of the lumpiness and the qualities of the heather. This is my favourite thing, dripping it down. I love it when inks drip. I'm not so keen on paint dripping, but I really love inks dripping because that's what inks seem to want to do. So you get some really lovely spidery marks that go really nicely against the much more chunkier marks. So if I wasn't doing this relatively flat, I wouldn't have this problem. If I was doing it on an easel, then of course it would run. But there's pros and cons with having it upside down versus having it horizontal versus vertical. Let's see how we go with this. So I'm actually being quite sort of immediate and intuitive with the marks. I'm keeping it very loose. I'm not being too literal. I'm trying to sort of respond to both the view and then what's happening on the paper. So if I'm getting some interesting marks, I'm sort of adding and contrasting with those existing marks that I've put down on the paper. So to try and keep it really organic. And bear in mind, I should say, that I'm not precious with these because I know I'm going to tear them up and do things with them. They're just sketches really. They are painting on location, but I call it mixed media mark making because it's a little bit, it feels less precious that way. And then once I get them back into the studio, so now I'm shaking paint on, which is that liquid paint I mentioned to you, just to get some more interesting variety of marks. And that red that you just saw me use, I say red, but it's actually a brown. It's burnt sienna, but that seems much more of a red that seems to be in nature, especially as coming into the autumn, versus a brighter red. Of course, it depends on what the subject matter is. But what I was saying is I just kind of try and keep it really, really loose and intuitive. So I'm putting in some, actually I'm just using that yellow as it is, and that's lemon yellow, so it's quite acidy. But I'll blend it in and I'll work over it in a minute and you'll see that. So I just wanted to kind of just give you a bit of a talk through some of the things that I do. Always trying to keep it loose. As I was saying, that I'm going to actually take these and use them for collaging back in the studio. So I am going to reconfigure them because at the moment I'm just responding. I'm not thinking. I'm not trying to make a good composition, and that's the point really. I love doing this on location because there is not that pressure to perform. There's just a pressure to respond, which is kind of a nice thing to do really. Now I'm using Inktense pencils, and you can really see me working now into the paint. Because it's quite wet, you're not getting much of an effect yet, and that's the thing. As it dries, you get different effects, and that's the kind of niceness of it really.